What's going down, man? It's me, it's your man, Jono. I'm just here today to talk to y'all about my Scott Fishbowl experience, which was fire, bro. Uh, had a great time down at Boston SFB14 Gala, the last hoorah, the last Scott Fishbowl. Super great time, man. Big energy. Big names obviously there, man. Just happy to be a part of this whole process. The Scott Fishbowl tournament again, my second year. So definitely had a great time this year for sure. Just gonna talk to you guys and recap a little bit about my draft and some things I took away and approach that like all of a sudden I'm starting to finally figure out who I am in these drafts, man, and it's actually it's pretty awesome for sure. So Andrew Cooper, Lawrence Jackson, Bob Gilchrist, just a great group of guys, man, all the way across the board. Also, some familiar faces, some friendly faces from last year. Caught a little flack about Anthony Richardson. I wasn't buying the hype last year, and one of the guys I was drafting with, he made sure to come up and let me know. And I told him, I said, well, new year, new storyline, man. So I'm in on them this year for sure. So with that being said, just to recap my draft for you guys, man, drafting out of the 5 spot in the Sergeant Dignam division here of The Departed, one of my favorite movies, by the way. If you haven't seen it, man, get out from underneath that rock and go check it out. Like, I highly recommend it. One of my top 5 movies of all time. But yeah, so picking out of the 5 spot this year, my very first pick was Anthony Richardson. And here's why. Like, for me, seeing what I seen last year, like, I'm a UT guy, so seeing him in college, it was something that I wasn't buying the hype behind Anthony Richardson. And this year, after watching him play a couple games and seeing like what that ceiling looked like, I'm in, especially in this type of format, right, where you have to shoot for the moon, you have to get unique in terms of how you build your roster. And it's very, very challenging for your thought process to go against the grain from what you typically would do in normal draft situations and draft settings. But anyway, Anthony Richardson, man, my first pick. A lot of people are very, very high on him. A lot of people's I don't want to say dark horse to be QB1 this year, but I think a lot of people are expecting a lot of good things from him, and you can actually bundle me in with that group as well, as he is my number 1 pick in the 2024 Scott Fish Bowl. My second pick overall, Jaden Daniels. I went into this thing with a plan, and my plan was originally to, if I had one of my 4 top-rated quarterbacks to take them. I was planning on ending up with a wide receiver at 1, but obviously I ended up with Anthony Richardson. So in the 2 spot, I took Jaden Daniels. I was like, okay, it's time to get unique really quickly because they had some really funny and odd things happen in the first round of our draft. CeeDee Lamb ended up going in the 11th spot. So I immediately knew that like it was going to have to kind of pivot, which is one of the awesome things about this draft is like the pivots and, how you go about things and in that nature. So Jaden Daniels was my second pick. Love it. So I'm starting off my draft with 2 of the most dynamic electric quarterbacks, in obviously in the summer you could ask for, right? So far on paper, man, feeling good. Third round reversal comes. I was really, really hoping to land a Saquon Barkley in that spot. He went about 2 spots before me. So again, had to pivot, look down at my sheet, and Devontae Adams is somebody that I had ranked as a top 10 player, skill position player that was left on the board. I know he's a little bit longer in the tooth, but Devontae Adams, one thing and we all know about Tay is he's going to get the targets. And I went into this, I had a lot of different thought processes and a lot of things that I had looked at. And one of the things that I really wanted to kind of lock in on and focus on was true number 1 wide receivers if I had the ability to get them. And Devontae Adams is absolutely a true number 1 wide receiver. Doesn't have the game-breaking speed for sure, but he's a guy that, he's going to get the football, right? Like, he's going to get the football. And for me, that was something that, like, you can't put a price tag on that opportunity. So I went with Tay. Fourth round, I took Evan Ingram as my tight end. One of my other initial plans was to get out of here and make sure I had a tight end that could potentially bring me back top 3 to top 5 value. And I felt like I did that with Evan Ingram. I think, I'm really banking on, and Trevor Lawrence is a guy that, like, if I would have went wide receiver early on and filled up my skill positions, Trevor Lawrence was somebody that I was banking on, maybe taking there in the 5th round or so. Obviously, starting off with 2 quarterbacks, I had no need for Trevor Lawrence. But I think this year, this could be the year that Trevor Lawrence takes that step forward for sure, because I think we all know the pedigree's there. The talent's obviously there as well. Skill positions look a little bit different this year, but if we can keep Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram on the field for Trevor Lawrence, I feel really good about this Jaguars passing attack. So Evan Ingram, he's my tight end 1. And then again, with the theme of true number 1 wide receivers, DK Metcalf, got a new coaching regime here. I think they're going to be a little bit more up to speed with the NFL in terms of throwing the football, passing concepts, route combination, those things. As well. I know a lot of people are obviously super high on JSN, which I think JSN is a talent for sure. But, when you talk about physically imposing wide receivers, DK Metcalf fits the bill. And I think there you could look at DK Metcalf any year and say that, hey, man, there's definitely a possibility that he could be one of the top 10 wide receivers for sure. I know there's a lot of questions about the quarterback position there with Geno Smith and Sam Howell. But again, DK Metcalf is somebody for me who fits the build of a true number 1 wide receiver. So I was happy to be able to take him at the 5'8" spot at wide receiver 17 overall so far in my Scott Fish Bowl. And then we get into round 6. One of my guys, I'm trying to make sure I leave every single draft I can with this next player, and that's George Pickens. Deontay Johnson traded away to Carolina. So there's a lot of targets to still be had, and it's either going to be George Pickens or Pat Freiermuth. But I think when you look at George Pickens and you see what he is athletically, big, fast, makes obviously crazy catches for sure. He's a year 3 wide receiver, which, this should be the year for him to break out. So obviously an upgrade at the quarterback position for sure. The last, 2 years, he hasn't had that at that position. So, I think when you think of Arthur Smith and what he was able to get going with A.J. Brown, a big play kind of guy, very similar to George Pickens, not necessarily getting the volume that like he's seeing now in Philadelphia for sure. But I think George Pickens has the ability to take it to the house at any point in time. So again, staying true to that theme, I feel like, now I'm looking at my roster and I have 3 number 1 wide receivers, and I'm feeling really, really good about that. At round 7, pick 8. This was just a value pick here, man. I found myself in a really unique situation. This next player, I was looking at my board and I had him ranked, number 30, 32 overall, and he's still hanging out here in round 7. And I kind of double dipped, and I mentioned this earlier, but Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville Jaguars, Christian Kirk. So now I have Christian Kirk on my roster along with Evan Ingram. So 2 Jacksonville Jaguars for sure. So I'm really hoping that Trevor Lawrence obviously takes this next step. If he takes that next step this year as a quarterback, obviously I'm going to be here to benefit from it with those 2 players from the Jacksonville Jaguars, the 2 top pass catchers from the Jacksonville Jaguars, with a quarterback that still has a ceiling that he hasn't reached yet. And I think it's, I don't want to say it's make or break, but he just got paid. So I'm feeling good about where we're at. Round 8, Calvin Ridley. Again, he's not a number 1 wide receiver. I don't think. We don't know. There's a pair of guys there in him and D-Hop. But the offense is going to look a lot different. They're going to be throwing the ball around the yard a lot more. The tempo is going to be picked up for sure. And they made a lot of improvements during the offseason. Will Levis is a player that I was kind of hoping for to maybe get as my quarterback 3. Didn't happen. But now, man, I'm looking at my roster and I'm looking at these wide receivers and I'm feeling really, really confident about the selections that I've made and where they could end up at this year from a performance side. So Round 9, I finally pulled the trigger on a running back, and the running back that I pulled the trigger on was the Cincinnati Bengals, Zach Moss. And Zach Moss, he obviously done a lot of really good things last year for the Indianapolis Colts. It showed up big on the waiver wire for a lot of managers last year. And Joe Mixon is somebody who was on the field quite a bit last year. I think I looked up some stats, and he was one of the top backs on the field for the Cincinnati Bengals last year. And obviously there's Chase Brown there, who's more of a third down receiving back who's got some potential as well. But to fill in that Joe Mixon role, Zach Moss is now that guy in Cincinnati. So that's my first running back. And, I caught a little bit of flag from some guys there drafting and stuff about not addressing the running back position a little bit earlier. But in this format, you got to remember, you only start one wide receiver, you only start one running back, you only start one tight end, one quarterback, and then you have a super flex position, and then you have 5 other flex spots. So in my opinion, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, hey, if we only start one running back, if I can get a running back that's going to be on the field and have an opportunity, all right, cool. Like, I got one. It's not like he's not going to get any run. So I feel okay about where I'm at with Zach Moss. I think every roster is going to have holes on it in this format. There's no way that everybody's roster is going to be constructed perfectly without holes. And running back being a position that, traditionally speaking, you can get guys off the waiver wires. A lot of like waiver wire darlings or late round picks last year were running back, right? Because running back is a volatile spot. Obviously, we know about the injuries and things like that. So I feel good about Zach Moss. I think it could have went a lot worse. I think last year when I took a similar approach at wide receiver, it was really bad. My first pick was Kadarius Toney. So hopefully Zach Moss is not Kadarius Toney in the running back fashion. So 10th round, again, another guy with crazy high upside at wide receiver. Obviously, a lot of people, very polarizing wide receiver when you talk about him in the fantasy communities, and Christian Watson. There's things that say, hey, Christian Watson, Jordan Love. Jordan Love was worse when Christian Watson was on the field. And Christian Watson, is he going to be on the field? And, this and that. And like, hey, in this kind of format, like, this is a guy who can have mad crazy upside. Obviously, we're just starting to see scratch the surface of what Jordan Love is and can be as a quarterback. And he did that last year with arguably, I'm not going to say his best wide receiver, but his most explosive and most dynamic playmaker on the Green Bay Packers and Christian Watson. So obviously I'm going to take a chance here. And now looking at those wide receivers, I'm saying, okay, like, I feel really good at where I'm at this point. So really when you get to round 11 was the first time I felt like I made a pick that I wasn't necessarily in love with or over the moon. It was more of a safety pick, right? And that pick is Brandon Cooks. Probably could have waited a little bit later on to get him for sure. But I seen a team that was looking really nice at the 1-1 overall. They had taken Dak Prescott. And I didn't want to run the risk of, a cheaper stack on the back end of things. Probably just in my head, probably more likely than not. That's one pick that I'm just not like overly thrilled about. But again, in this format, Brandon Cooks is somebody who, is a viable flex option on a week by week basis. So I could totally deal with that. No question at all. Round 12, I took J.J. McCarthy. He was the last quarterback. I had to address the quarterback position with a third quarterback. The reason being is because I have 2 quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels and Anthony Richardson who have week 14 buys. So I feel like this is a roster that I've constructed. Obviously, everybody feels like this, that should be and could be playing in the playoffs. And if that's the case, right, I'm going to have my 2 biggest weapons unavailable to me in week 14. So I'm hoping, obviously, at some point in time in the season, J.J. McCarthy is obviously going to be the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm not over the moon with J.J. McCarthy, but the one thing I do understand and realize and know is that he's going to be on the field. And at some point when he is on the field, he's going to be throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson. And Kevin O'Connell is going to throw the football. He's always throwing the football, no matter whether it's Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs, Kirk Cousins. It doesn't matter who it is. Whoever's playing quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings are going to be throwing the football. So I feel like in this format, JJ can move around a little bit. So he might be able to give me something, even anything if we get to week 14. And now we're getting to a point in time for me in the draft where now I got to get ready to start hammering running back. And I got a really unique approach here in terms of how I'm handling the running back position in the Scott Fishbowl format. And what I'm doing in my thought process on this with this Scott Fishbowl, was, again, to address the running back position and get one running back. Obviously, would I have loved to have Saquon Barkley early on in this draft? 100%, 1,000,000%, absolutely. My approach was still going to be the same, though. I was going to get that one running back. And as we get into the later rounds, I'm going to start taking flyers on guys because I know that at some point in time, some of these running backs that I'm going to take, they're going to have an opportunity to play. They're going to be potentially a starter for a week or two just because of the way the running back position is in the NFL. So I handcuffed Zach Moss to make sure that, I could always at least start a running back between Zach Moss and Chase Brown. So I have Chase Brown there. Like I said, I like Chase Brown. I like what he does for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I handcuffed that up. Round 14, I took Ray Davis for the Buffalo Bills. He's a rookie. Obviously, it's hard to expect anything with rookies, right? But I just one of the things I've been paying a lot of attention to over this offseason is just paying attention to like running back frames and seeing like the size of some of these guys. Granted, nobody's getting the 20 to 25 carries like that, like very far and few between for sure. But as I'm looking at guys, like I'm starting to see some of these guys that have smaller frames. You think about like Kyron Williams, I think he's like a $198. James Cook, smaller frame guy. Like I'm looking at those guys and I'm targeting like backup running backs in those situations just from a frame size of thing because like, hey, are they going to be able to hold up for an entire season taking that wear and tear? So Ray Davis was somebody that I took, hoping for some upside, hoping to catch, a little bit of lightning in a bottle for sure. My next pick was Tyrone Tracy. And now we're starting to get into a very interesting situation for me that I can kind of peel back some of the layers on. And one of the things, the reason why I took Tyrone Tracy is obviously Devin Singletary's the running back for the New York Giants this year. But Tyrone Tracy is somebody that, hey, he might get some run this year. But even if he doesn't get some run, Tyrone Tracy is a returner. And so Tyrone Tracy now as a returner and as a running back, now I'm able to get double the value for this position later on in the draft. And I think that's a thing that I don't know if a lot of people took into consideration. And some people did, and they were jumping up for wide receivers early. And my pivot was to go to running back. So I took Tyrone Tracy, and I'm starting to kind of go down that return running back path and finding return men who are running back that could potentially give me some value, obviously, in the return game. Maybe not necessarily carrying the football, but in the return game. And if things go good for them, they can then become a running back, which now provides a different set of value for me as well. My next pick at pick 16, I just made him today. This is a guy, man, I went so heavy, so hard in the paint on this guy last year, man. He might be the reason why I single-handedly stung my season last year in a lot of leagues. And that's Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce, if he's returning kicks for the Houston Texans, obviously, again, like I stated, the format, the position, the situation, right? I think it's something that could create some value. And this is something that I'm going to try to take advantage of and hit over the next handful of rounds are those running backs who are in the return game that I can play in the running back position and get some value from them in that situation. So at this point, I got 6 more picks left in my Scott Fish Bowl draft. Obviously, we're slow right now, but I just wanted to get on, kind of go over my draft, talk through my thought process, and let you guys know that, hey, my niche, I guess, man, the 2 years in a row, last year it was 0 wide receiver. This year it's 0 RB. So I think that's kind of my new niche, man, in the Scott Fish Bowl is, hey, if I'm blessed enough to be able to get back into this thing next year, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to find a 0 format and I'm going to attack it and try to debunk the theory along that. Not just because it's a fun thing to do or it's funny or entertaining or anything, but I think there's definitely ways to be creative and to find value in this type of roster, in this type of scoring format, I should say, in this type of construction. So 0 wide receiver. That's not how I planned to go into it. That's just how it happened, man. Was that right there? So obviously, hey, we got the fantasy football season right around the corner here. It's the end of July. So stay tuned, man. Like, I'm going to start trying to go over some rankings with you guys, my own personal rankings for what it's worth and put it out there to you guys. But just want to say again, man, just want to review my Scott Fish Bowl draft with you guys for sure and talk through things, man. But y'all know my name, man. I'm Jono. I'm trying to stay at this the best I can, man, and share this insight with y'all, man. Nothing but peace and love to everybody out there in the fantasy football community. One love. I'm out, man.